Hey guys, and welcome to this week's What Do You Want to Know Wednesday. The question comes from LCFM 2002, and it's an absolute ripper. Also, thanks to everyone else that sent their questions in. I'm running a little bit short on time today, so I'm going to only answer this one, but keep sending them in, and I'll do my best next week to try and answer a few in the one video. But their question was, what are the advantages of growing in a raised bed or row versus just growing directly into the ground? So what I went and did was I've made a little bit of a list here to go through to just remind me so I can remember exactly rather than just spinning it off the top of my head and just rambling on. So what we'll do is we'll go through this list for raised beds and then obviously in for the ground. So first thing we'll cover off is the raised bed. So the raised bed, one of the benefits is actually warmer soil. So obviously when you raise soil up into a row or you raise it up into a timber bed or something like that, the soil warms up a lot quicker. So what that allows you to do is actually plant a lot earlier, say in spring and in summer, against sort of towards the end of the growing season as well. It sort of extends it. So you get those little cheat where you can sort of get a little bit earlier rather than sort of waiting just normally for the ground to warm up on its own. So that's one of the first points. Prevent soil compaction. So obviously in a raised bed or raised row, you create paths. You only step on those paths. Obviously in a raised bed made out of timber, you're not stepping on any of the soil at all. Obviously if you sort of think about it in Mother Nature, you know, you've got cattle, say cattle, or you've got deer, horses trampling on the earth. Every time it gets trampled on, or even us humans walk on the earth, it gets compacted down. So it alleviates any compaction in the soil. Another good point is good drainage. So obviously, reverting it back to the market garden here, I obviously have raised rows. So good drainage. So obviously whenever it rains or whenever I use irrigation to water overhead, the water will sit on top of the bed, but as it starts to fill up and it's got enough water that's soaked on top, the excess water will actually start to run down the sides. It's the same principle for obviously in a raised bed as well. So all the water will sit up on the top and then it will actually start to make its way down the sides once it's got too much, or once it's sort of soaked in enough, the excess water will soak down the sides. For another good point is a barrier for pests or slugs. So obviously this question this answer more relates to a timber raised bed or a corrugated iron sort of bed or something like that. Pests like slugs and snails, they sort of will start to climb up the sides maybe. You can sort of put some copper tape along the top and that'll actually prevent those sort of slugs and bugs getting down there. Obviously if it's raised as well, it's harder for them to sort of get to your veggies by climbing up that. They'd rather stay down in the grass or in the, where it's nice and moist throughout the day and stuff like that. So that's another great reason. The last one that I've got down here for the raised bed is accessibility. So obviously being raised up, you don't have to bend over, or you're not hunched over as much. Obviously whenever you turn over the soil or you're adding sort of compost and you want to mix that through, it's a lot easier, especially if you've got higher raised beds like you use in the fruit, next fruit bin or something like that. So that's some of the pros that I've found for raised beds. Now we'll switch it over to the ground. So for the ground, there's obviously a technique it's called no dig. So you obviously don't dig into the ground, you actually start to build on top of the ground. So you might put down a layer of cardboard or newspaper, and then you might water that in, and then obviously that'll suppress the weeds or the grass, whatever you're going on top of. And then you start layering it with compost, some soil, manure, mulch and stuff like that. And then you actually start growing in there. So you're obviously alleviating having to actually dig anything in. You're actually growing on those layers. So that's a good one to go for. I've put down less labour, question marks. Obviously, if you're going to be growing directly on top of the ground, you're not going to be building raised beds or raised rows. There's no need for that extra labour to actually have to build the actual bed itself or build the actual row up with the soil. Obviously here in the market garden I've got the use of the tractor, so that does all that heavy lifting for me, but obviously you wouldn't need anything like that if you're going to be growing directly into the ground. It's obviously cheaper just to grow onto the ground. Obviously there's no materials that you need to actually build a raised bed or anything like that, or any tools or any machinery to actually make the raised bed. If you're going to be doing that as well, you literally can get in there, turn over the soil by hand, start planting straight away. Following on from that, I've written down no need for a machine. So realistically, you don't need a rotary hoe or a tractor in my case to actually start forming the beds and stuff like that. You can just literally get a couple of pitchforks, a shovel, and start sort of turning over the soil that way and get planting directly into it. So there's some of the pros for both sides. So it's really a personal choice. I don't sit here and say, definitely, use raised beds or definitely use raised rows or definitely grow into the ground. It really comes down to your personal preference. For my personal preference, I love growing in raised beds. I build raised beds for people, especially in sort of inner city, in the urban environment, who might live in like a small backyard or might only have a courtyard or even a balcony, because you easily can build in on top of, say, like a concrete structure or something like that. So that for me, and then especially obviously being down here at the market garden, I find the benefits of raised rows a lot better for my situation here. Obviously, as I said, trying to get that jump by getting the warmer soil to start with, and extending the season that way as well. So, as I said, it's really a personal preference, and there's loads and loads of pros for both. There's probably loads and loads of cons on both these as well, but hopefully that gives you a bit better of an insight into what my thinking of it is. And yeah, so that's it. That's my answer. That's what I'm going to stick with. Hope you enjoyed this video, guys. As I said, make sure you send in questions. Whatever you want to know on these What Do You Want to Know Wednesday, this is your chance to ask me, and I can try and do my best to answer them, or just give my point of view in growing and stuff like that. Share and like the videos. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't yet, and we will see you next video, which will be an update video. Have a great rest of the week, guys.